timer on, and I'll record the session. So this is the Bellevue room. Over to Michael Ward.
Thank you, Andrew, and hi everyone on the Zoom and in the Bellevue ward. Pleasure to be here tonight. Hopefully, I've door knocked 90-95% of with a small team doors in Bellevue. So hopefully you're part of the 90-95%, and if you went home, you might have got something under the door. Yeah, Michael Nolan. I've lived in East Kew, or is the vernacular, but Q East is what it is these days in the postcode for 26 years. I live over near Hayes Paddock, just on the east side of Hayes Paddock, between Beck Road and Hayes Paddock, quite close to Hayes Paddock. I lived there with my family for 26 years, and that's where I am tonight. I'm an engineer, and I've had a mostly corporate background with a bit of consulting and contracting interspersed along the way. And I've been project director in manufacturing. I've led large teams developing major infrastructure and worked to reduce emissions and make large facilities such as warehouses and big cold stores running at -20-degree energy efficient and not using any gas on site and that sort of thing. So I think that's, if I'm elected, that'll be a useful skill set. I've been actively involved in climate campaigning since I read I think Tim Flannery's book back around 2006. And then I worked with Lynn Franks and Deb Sparks and people at QE's Primary to put on a forum, state election forum, something a little bit like this, but it wasn't Zoom, it was live. And I've been involved with Lighter Footprints in a number of ways. So I was convener of Energy Transition Group for few years before passing to David Strang. I've done a lot of submissions on climate to state government, federal government, council. And I've been involved in other campaigns outside of Lighter Footprints. So AGL campaign in Western Port to stop the LPG terminal with Environment Victoria. So John O'Leno's is there now. So that was very successful. And I've also done things like tree planting in the Colaban catchment near a friend's farm up near Kyneton. So, and that was, a family affair, got involved. So that was great. I resigned from being I was Lighter Footprints convener for 3.5 years, and I resigned from that before I started campaigning for council in Bellevue ward. Main reasons for standing for council, I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me that council's done a reasonable job on corporate emissions or the council's own emissions, except potentially to say Kew Recreation Centre gas-fired heating is not a great job, but they've done a reasonably good job. And the community emissions target for 2030 is 60%, and they have no real conviction about the community emissions target, which is 98% of all emissions in Boroondara are community emissions. So if you let that go and you concentrate on the 2%, it's not going to get us to what we need to do as a contributing society. So two friends encouraged me to run, and even my wife said I should run for council after I initially dismissed it. And so here I am, and yeah, been campaigning for about 4 months. I think I won't go into my campaign. You've seen it on my flyer. You might have heard me say it, but in a nutshell, it's responsible spending, cut down the waste on QREC and the customer first project like Customer First Portal, and now they're going to demolish Q Library. So that's about $80 million a year, that sort of expenditure. I'm going to go over, Andrew. Is that going to be okay? Or do you want me to?
No, I think you could do with another minute, given we've got the time.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, there's $80 million there that I will, if I'm elected, and there's like-minded councillors elected, independent councillors. I should have said I'm an independent community and I don't have any political allegiances, never been associated with a political party, never have been, and am not currently. So the question about, do you think councillors should play a more significant leadership role in the community when it comes to climate change? If so, what would that entail? So I said they've done an okay job. They're purchasing renewable energy. They've rolled out FOGO. They're reducing council emissions quite well.
How's that? Sorry, keep going.
Quite well, but
And
they
he,
lack conviction when it comes to community emissions. There is no conviction if you go along to a council meeting. I went along to a council meeting on the Climate Action Plan, the 2-year plan, which is part of the climate strategy, which is to 2030 to reduce by 60% community emissions, 60% by 2030, which is 6% a year. And I did a lot of work for that with couple of other people. I presented at council. I went along to the meeting and I didn't get one question. And they allocated $1 million last year. They spent $700,000. And one councillor said, well, all I've heard is we're not achieving the target. Why are we spending the $1 million? So I was a bit demoralised by that, and I went home. And then about a week later, I woke up and I thought, well, I can be demoralised or I can have a crack. So, yeah, here I am. I would like to see leadership for councillors and for council staff by having, first of all, KPIs. Just the analogy for me is OH&S. Anyone who's worked in industry or anywhere in the workplace, OH&S 20 years ago, if somebody had an accident, it was that person's fault. Or it might have been the safety officer's fault. It certainly wasn't the CEO's fault. It wasn't the HR fault. It wasn't the manager's fault. It was that person, or maybe it was the safety officer. And that's been transcended. Now everyone has OH&S in their job description. Everyone has a KPI. And so I'd like to see climate in the same sense. Have KPIs for climate is everyone's job. What new initiative would I propose? Well, that's one of them. The other one is, I think, I'll just mention a couple of things. One is on solar PV.
and I'll just
Boroondara
interrupt you very
lags.
briefly, Michael, that Greg
Yep.
has finally arrived for. We might give you the wrap up in about 45 seconds, if that's okay.
Okay. So solar PV, we lag. Boroondara is about 13% solar PV. The national average is about 34%. So we need to survey 200 houses in each ward, and then find out what the real reasons are people aren't keeping up or doing that, and then come up with a plan. Community engagement is key to all of this, and I think John O'Lenore's or David Strang said strong community and good government. So that's sort of where it starts, and I'll probably wrap up on that point, but happy to take any questions when we go to questions.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now, Greg, are you there? If you could just come off mute or turn your camera on. We got you in the room. Congratulations. But we're not seeing or hearing you yet, unfortunately.
Are you able to unmute him, Andrew?
No, can I unmute him? No, I can only ask him to unmute. No, I can't physically unmute him. So, Greg.
Sorry, I mute there for a split second.
So, Greg, maybe I'll send you a chat just to check. Greg, can you hear us? I'll just send him a direct message to check whether he's able to. So far. Sorry, Greg. It could be bandwidth. Doesn't seem to be working. So, Greg, another option could be to join via your mobile phone. If you're on your computer, that might have better coverage. You don't have to hang up. You could just get the email from there was the lighter footprints, and then click on the link, and then I'll look out for you to assign you. But I'm not sure that you're actually hearing me at all because you haven't responded to my chat, unfortunately. We better plow on then, and then we'll just adjust things if Greg's able to hear us or participate. And the next thing we're going to do, apart from hearing from Greg, is to have some questions for the candidates. So on that basis, Charles, would you be able to ask Michael the first question, please?
Yes, well, there's a question. There are some questions around.
Actually, Charles, I might pause you if I could, because it looks like Greg's back
Okay.
on another device. We might actually have him. Greg, are you there? There he is. We have contact. Hello, Greg. If you just come off mute, we can't hear you as yet. Can you hear us? You can.
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. And I would invite you now to cancel out of that second device because it's causing a loop, please.
Yes, it is, isn't it? So I'll
Yep,
have to close that.
Yep.
I hope I have.
Or if it's on your computer, you could just turn the sound off it.
Okay, that should have done it.
That sounds
yes,
better.
so Greg
crashes
my computer, unfortunately.
Yes, might need some sort of attendance there. So thank you very much for persisting, Mrs. Greg, because everybody's very keen to have more than one candidate. Nothing personal, Michael. So what I've just been through with the participants is the agenda. And so the agenda is to spend a few minutes hearing from you. We've just heard from Michael with some of those pre-prepared questions. Michael, in the end, had about 6.5 minutes, so I'll do the same for you. Are you in a position to start that?
Yes, so there are 4 sections: the introduction, leadership, climate action plan, and engagement. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll start the clock, and I'd like to hand over to you to tell us about yourself.
My reasons for running for council are to increase interaction in the community through expanding programs such as Boroondara Summer in the Park, and expanding that to programs in winter, and to make progress on big issues working with the state, such as reducing the noise and particulate matter pollution from the Eastern Freeway, placing our power lines underground, and utilising the area of the freeway, for example, installing solar panels on the freeway that's covered, and on the road cutting, perhaps recreational facilities. Also to improve the city staff accountability with the community in soliciting community input and acting on that, and improving council decision making. And also on the finance side is to freeze rates, because general rates have been increasing faster than inflation, and to cut wasteful spending in services, maintenance, and capital projects. So before I go into the other 3, I do need to give you some background where I've come from. So in 1973, 51 years ago, as an engineering student, I did a project looking at what the future was in energy. And what I saw was that as a transportation fuel, we'd be using hydrogen, and would be the transmission of electricity around the country would be by superconducting cables. And the storage of energy would be perhaps pumped hydro, but I actually saw flywheels as the way forward. Now, 50 years on, not much is the fuel. I mean, the future looks much the same. That hydrogen still looks to be a good transportation fuel, especially for bigger vehicles like trucks, trains, and perhaps aeroplanes. Possibly internal combustion in some cases, but mostly hydrogen fuel cell electric powered vehicles. And we do have now some superconducting distribution around the world. And we also have some flywheels on a commercial scale as energy storage rather than using batteries. So on leadership, I think the most important way to cut greenhouse gas emissions is to try and increase the usage of public transport. So that would mean building out the existing infrastructure for public transport, like increasing some of our tram routes in Bellevue, and reducing fares. Reducing fares has been shown to be extremely effective in Queensland just now in increasing ridership. Oh yes, and I've already mentioned another one would be when enclosing the Eastern Freeway is to put solar panels on it. That would be generating electricity for the community. And placing power lines underground would allow us to improve our streetscapes and allow trees to grow taller, increasing canopy. And when we're going against what the city wants, when we're replacing roads, replacing asphalt roads, the idea would be to use concrete where possible. Because concrete is less expensive, it lasts longer, has a higher albedo to reduce the heating effect, and is bitumen free. And as for solar, I'd say use that where feasible and economical, but tree canopy comes before solar. And the reason is that the excess electricity we require will have to be brought in from outside Boroondara. I'll move on to the action plan. And I haven't seen the latest version, but this is what I think is important. One is to plant and maintain trees as appropriate to provide shade in summer to reduce energy consumption. And to support community, let me back off. And of course, to promote the use of cars, promote the use of public transport to reduce the reliance on cars. And also to build on community initiatives to reduce energy lost in homes and to convert from natural gas. And I'm up to engagement, yes. So I think the continuation of forums is very good, but we must realize that with 167,000 residents in Boroondara and having a few hundred, if we're lucky, 1,000 residents in attendance at forums, we're still only reaching out to a very small proportion of our residents in Boroondara. I think that articles in the Boroondara Bulletin, if delivered in hard copy, are effective. My experience is that many people who receive an electronic copy of the bulletin just don't read it. And perhaps the best method of all is in schools, is to reach out to children in schools through presentations, and then the children can take this message home and discuss what they've learned with their parents. And that's all I wanted to say on those 4 questions.
Thank you very much, Greg, and glad you got here as well. All right, so what we're about to embark on, just as you joined, was the questions from the participants. And Charles was just about to ask the most amazing question when I jumped in and said stop. So
Okay.
we might just give you a break, Greg, and come back to Michael. And you'll have about a minute each on these questions, and I'll put the timer on so we'll all know what's happening. So Charles, could you please ask that question you're about to ask? Or another one if it was even better.
Andrew, I think the 4th question, I missed hitting the send button, so I think Michael wouldn't have seen it. Michael, did you see the 4th question regarding engagement?
No, I didn't. I've seen question 3, Charles. I haven't
Yeah.
seen question 4.
So I think, Andrew, we give Michael an opportunity to answer or address that question around what is it? Hang on. Now,
Community engagement. Do you want me to answer all 40 or just?
No. Just. I think you've answered the other. You've addressed the other 3, but community engagement is key to encouraging community action on climate change. How could council better engage with residents and businesses on that issue?
Michael, are you able to do that? 45
Sure.
seconds. Excellent.
How long are you going to limit these answers to?
45 seconds. I put
45
seconds.
minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I think Electrify Boroondara is a really good model. Council should really get behind that. For anyone who's been Electrify Boroondara, had 2 expos now. I'd love to be doing surveys by door knock, random door knocking with community outreach staff, because when you do an opt-in survey, you get the people that are already convinced respond to the survey. We need to find out why people aren't putting solar panels on their roof, and we've got to go out to the people where they live and not wait for the people to come miraculously to council. So it's not, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's necessary. Like Boroondara Bicycle User Group does it, Electrify Boroondara does it, Saul Griffiths and Rewire Australia are doing it by postcode. We've got to go out to people. We've got to survey them, ask them, engage them, just as I've been doing with door knocking, just with the North East Link people have been doing with residents. Yep.
Michael, thank you very much. And thanks for picking that up, Charles. All
Okay.
right. So you were just about back to the questions from participants. There's our wind-up song. Sounds like the Olympics. Charles, we might then hand over to Greg then to give Michael a break.
Next
what was
question.
that first question from the participants you're going to ask?
I've just posted that. There are some questions on active transport. What do you think council can do to improve active transport, particularly to make it safer for school children?
Greg,
Now,
you've
you have to
got
explain
1
what you
minute.
mean by active transport.
Well, it would probably cover everything from walking, cycling, scooters, etc.
Oh, to make it safer.
Yes.
Is that what you?
Well, yeah. The questions were: what do you think council can do to improve active transport infrastructure, I guess, and particularly to make it safer for school children?
Well, safer. Well, we've already, the schools already have taken measures for that. For example, for the routes children use to go to school, there are often crossing guards. But if they're using public transport, that's PTV's responsibility, and the transport drivers, the bus drivers, and the tram drivers usually are very attentive to try to make their actions safe. That's been my observation. I don't have any ideas beyond what's already being done.
I guess one of the questions particularly was about making bike paths and more child friendly.
So, Greg, sorry, Charles, you sent that to Greg?
Sorry, I'm just clarifying that.
Well, bike paths with bicycles, my personal view is they're just great if people can use bicycles not on the street with cars. Once we have bicycles and cars together, it's inherently dangerous. Some streets have excellent bike lanes, Even so, when cars have to turn across the bike lanes, it becomes inherently more dangerous. I think it's a difficult problem to address, to make bicycles safe when the students have to go from protected areas like in parks to schools and other places, crossing roads with traffic. I don't have a good solution to that, except to the extent that bike lanes that we have are working.
Thank you, Greg. So we'll now hand over to Michael to address those questions that were just asked of Greg. You've got about 90 seconds. Are you across those questions?
You mean how do we promote active transport for children and for children? So,
Yes, and yes, I guess, and one of the questions also related to safety for school children.
oh, look, I think there's a whole range of things. There's not a magic bullet. I think the Europeans in general do it better. Certainly the Danes do it. The Dutch do it. I think I'm a bike rider. I'm a big proponent of having separate bike trails, not on-road bike trails. I don't think there's many people like riding on road. So we've got to prioritise off-road. There are gaps in the bike network. There's a gap, like let's say for Anniversary Trail, where it crosses Toorak Road. We need a bridge there. We need the Box Hill to Hawthorn Trail. Council needs to get behind that. Better Streets, the organisation Better Streets has a lot of good ideas, reducing, calming traffic around streets, maybe 40 kilometres an hour. We can have zones for restricting parking further away from schools so that, let's say within half a kilometre, you can't drive a car within half a kilometre within, let's say 8 a.m. till 9 a.m. so people can walk and ride in that zone, but they can't bring a car into the zone. Walking buses, that's been done. I think we could resurrect walking buses. And I think some of it's cultural, some of it is amenity. Near where I've been door knocking in Harp Road, there's some really deadly crossings there. We need pedestrian crossings at the dip where one of the trails crosses Harp Road, and then the big roundabouts up near Willsmere and up near the end of Belford Road. They really need a good look. They're a hazard to walkers and cyclists, and getting across High Street up near the Briquettes Coffee Cafe. So there's a lot of things we can do. We need culturally and KPIs and council and councillors to be wanting to do that. That's what community wants. That's what I'm on about.
Thank you, Michael. So let's carry on. And Charles, what would you like to choose next out of that box for the candidates? So we might go to Greg with this one.
Okay. Again, question from the residents. What probity measures could be introduced on decision-making to ensure that buildings are not demolished unnecessarily, for example, Kew Library, and avoid waste? I guess the proposition is the most sustainable building is the existing building, and why isn't more effort made to refurbish them?
Greg, I'll give you 90 seconds.
Well, I think the first, yes, thank you. I think the first step there is to engage the community in town hall meetings to, first of all, find out what community sentiment is, and to find out what the different options are which can be developed. And in many cases, we'll find out that there's significant community support for maintaining what already exists, and perhaps finding out what needs to be augmented to meet future demand. The project that disturbed me most in recent years was the Baldwin Community Centre. There were 3 beautiful, beautiful buildings there, and I used to enjoy going there. But then the council did a multi-million-dollar upgrade, and it's completely lost its appeal to me. So I can see that same situation being replicated elsewhere. It's not a one-off problem. But as I said, I think the first step is to engage the community and to not start with what the council staff wants to do. And as for waste, if we some projects should not be entered into, that the upgrades are basically not worth the money that's being allocated for them. And in other cases, if additional facilities are needed, perhaps the development needs to be done elsewhere, not to modify an existing building.
Greg, another
As
15
for
seconds.
waste in other places, I think a lot of the council initiatives, when we hear how much they cost, are just outrageously expensive. Even the process to develop a tree strategy plan, that was very expensive. And it shouldn't have been.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Greg.
I'm finished. Thank you.
Michael, what would you like to say in response to that question?
Oh, look, 70% of people that I've door knocked are really, really surprised that the Kew Library is going to be demolished and rebuilt. There wasn't proper community consultation, particularly in East Kew, who do use the Kew Library. People in North Balwyn tend to go to Greythorn across to Balwyn. The council had a predetermined agenda. There was a report written proposing the library would be demolished and rebuilt. They then went for consultation with community. What would you like to see in the facility that's going to be demolished and rebuilt? They then got on the back foot and said, oh, we had a look at a renovation renewal. People have asked on freedom of information. It hasn't been forthcoming. So two things: lack of proper community consultation on all the options, putting renewal and renovation on the table and asking people about that. There's a lot of sentimental attachment to the Kew Library, and they forget that when they demolish and take it out of action for 3 years, what's everyone going to do in terms of students studying the toy library, etc. The Kew, it's the old Kew Town Hall, built in the 1960s, solid brick. It might need some rewiring. They're not being forthcoming what it is. We've never seen the report. Might need air conditioning. Might need some double glazed windows on the Alexandra Garden side. This can all be done. Yeah, so we've got to have transparency and integrity and stop the waste.
Thank you very much, Michael. So it's time for another question. And Michael, you okay? We might swap the order and have you go first and then Greg second. Charles, what would you like to put forward?
Okay. There's a question on the use of glyphosates and herbicides. What do you believe? Some other councils have stopped using these. What do you believe should be council's position on herbicides in public places?
Oh wow, that's a tricky question. So glyphosate, Roundup, other trade names, originally Roundup, I think is more controversial in Australia, less controversial in America. I think it's got to be really targeted and really carefully managed glyphosate, so low wind. The alternatives are mulching and low mowing, which they're doing in the UK. A friend of mine is associated with a park in Birmingham. They're doing zero mowing around tree canopy at the bottom, at the foot of the tree. So cut down mowing, cut down whippersnipper, cut down glyphosate, cut down costs. So again, where there's a will, there's a way. I'm not an expert on alternatives to glyphosate apart from mulching, apart from those things I've just said. In terms of herbicides, other herbicides, it's so ubiquitous. I think there is association with cancer. I do think we need to tackle it, but I'd be starting with some winnable things like underneath the canopy of big trees and stop mowing and let the grass grow or mulch it, and let's when we have a win on that, then we say, okay, where are we going to go next? With community consultation and with the right expertise, and let's look at what other people around the world are doing. What does good look like?
Thank you, Michael. Greg, what would you like to comment?
Well, I'd be very reluctant to use herbicides at all. I don't use them myself. What I've found is if I just, in the lawn, for example, if I just dig the weeds out, do that for a couple of years, then the weeds are essentially gone. Many of our parks, at least near where I live, they look green, but a lot of the cover is actually weeds. And it's not just our parks, but we have a problem with another area where we influence and have some control, and that is down near the Yarra River. They're just full of weeds, exotic weeds. And some groups actually do go in and clear the weeds out and try and establish native grasses. And I think we might have something like that in Hayes Paddock. But that would be my approach. I think we should try to avoid using herbicides at all. And we should organize the large groups of volunteers who would like to do something to rid areas of exotic weeds and introduce native grasses. And once we're on top of that, hopefully we can have much more attractive areas. These areas would, and the volunteers would have a connection with them and continue to maintain them. So I think that's actually a huge opportunity for us going forward. It's been a problem for many decades now, and no one's going to use such large-scale spraying of herbicides along the Yarra River, for example. And an alternative approach like volunteers, manually pulling out weeds is the way to go if we can get all the volunteers, which I think we can.
Greg. Well, we're really in the swing of things now. So Charles, what's up next? And we might go to swap again and go, Greg, you go first.
There's a question on EVs. What would you do to promote the use of EVs? Should council be investing in charging infrastructure?
Over to you, Greg.
This is me. Well, I think battery electric vehicles have a niche application, and it's for smaller vehicles like local transportation, perhaps a larger distance. But when we move up to things like big vehicles, trucks, council trucks, and long distance vehicles, and as I said before, trains and aeroplanes, we're going to be using something else. What appears to me to be a more effective solution in some applications is hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. So I think it's not just one solution here, but multiple. First of all, I'd like to inform the community as to what the technology landscape is, what's available, and for them to match up with what's appropriate for them. When it comes to charging battery electric vehicles, some people can easily do that at home if they've got a garage. Some people don't. So there'd be some community charging stations which would be appropriate. And the council, I think there's a place for the council to look into seeing how they can facilitate or promote that activity. I don't know enough, or I'm not far enough along in thinking to know if the council should actually make significant investments in that, or just facilitate others making investments. And perhaps I just wanted to make the one point is that, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's an aside, but I think there is a place for hydrogen fuel cell electrical vehicles. And for those, they have a small battery. The charging is not much of an issue. So I don't really know in 10 years' time what the landscape is going to look like there. But we've got some promising technology going forward. And I should stop there.
Thank you, Greg. Michael.
Yeah, look, I have an EV. I've had an EV since May last, me and my wife, and it's depending on the furthest trip dictates who takes the car. Then the EV goes on the furthest trip. Um, Council can do a lot. I think we've got to get our head around this, but there's some synergy around putting EV chargers into shopping centres where you might want a 30 or 40-minute charge, which would get you 50, 60, 70, 90% recharge. And that might be you go and do the weekly grocery shop down in Greythorn or in Willsmere, etc. Or probably not Willsmere, but you get my drift to have the EV chargers there. And encourage, we've got to build our shopping centres and look after them and stop congestion on the roads and stop them installing EV chargers out in Chadstone and Doncaster Shopping Town. We've got to have it in Boroondara. Keep the money circulating in Boroondara. We've got them in Hawthorn and Ashburton. We don't have any in Bellevue. Like, what, are we the poor cousin out here in Bellevue? And the other thing that's a really good idea is to have council to buy EVs on 2-year leases and put them out in the second-hand market after 2 years, not 4 or 5 years, 2 years. And wouldn't it be great if we could encourage Boroondara residents to get that second-hand car from council after 2 years at a significant discount to the cost of a new car? So council's got a lot of leadership to do there.
Thank you very much, Michael. Charles, what's up next?
We're starting to slow down on questions, but there was a follow-up question on active transport. A resident has identified 2 dangerous crossings in Bellevue, Willsmere and Belford Road roundabouts. What could council do to make them safe?
And let's put a minute on these ones and see if we can get through even some more. So, Michael, what would you say in answer to that? I'll get you to go first.
Great question. I've had people tell me on door knocking about those 2 areas. One's near a bus stop and one's very difficult to get from the community garden across to the Willsmere shops. I think I'm not a traffic expert, but I think we need people that are to present community and organise community consultation. What are the options? Do we need traffic lights? Do we need pedestrian lights at the dip on that really dangerous one at the dip between Willsmere roundabout and Belford roundabout? Those roundabouts work well when traffic is to a certain level. And once you reach a certain level, then the person who wants to do a straight ahead and is giving way to the right, and if the traffic's pouring up from Chandler Highway, that you never get a go, and let alone parents with kids or with teenagers or with bikes. So I don't know, we've got to look at the options. It might be traffic lights. I don't know, I'm not the expert, but let's have community consultation presented by traffic experts and then let us work out what we want.
Thank you, Michael. Greg, what are your views?
I'm not, I've been through those intersections, but I've never thought about any solution. But as Michael said, I think a good place to start is talking to the community and getting their feedback on what they think might be an appropriate solution. And sometimes the answer is in illuminating a roundabout and installing traffic lights. I've often seen that people are distracted at roundabouts. And if there is instead just a pedestrian crossing, it'd be necessary to make sure it's visible so that it doesn't become a trap. But that's all I have to say. It's really the community is the place we need to start looking for solutions there.
Thank you, Greg. Now, Charles, do you have another one from the chat box? Because, I mean, I've got a few up my sleeve that I could ask.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
All right. Well, these sort of things I typically ask candidates, do you have one particular thing that drives you nuts about our current council that you'd like to fix? So, Greg, would you like to go first? Do you think you'd be able to cover that off in a minute?
Not in 1 minute, no.
Well, let's give it a go. Give it a go, because we're running out of time. Go for it.
Yes. My concern is well, as we discussed before, a lot of initiatives seem to start with the staff And then when the councillors ask for feedback, they really get misinformation, but they don't get the information they need to make good decisions. And so I think there's a problem with what the staff present to councillors, and then there's a problem with the councillors interrogating the staff to really understand a problem and understand what the options are so they can make a good decision. I've often come away from a council meeting and with a feeling that neither the staff nor the council were presenting the issue as it should be presented. And I didn't understand how anyone could make a good decision with the information they were presented with.
Thank you very much, Greg.
And that's all I want to say.
Michael, a minute. What's one particular thing that drives you nuts you'd like to change?
Oh, look, it's all related to, I think, integrity and transparency and a more collaborative set of councillors, independent community-minded councillors with a more collegial, collaborative discussion rather than adversarial discussions, which I saw at the Kew Library decision. There's a waste on capital spend. We're getting $80 million worth of capital works. A lot of it's being wasted. We want to see integrity and transparency and reprioritisation for local community and climate. And a lot of it, the community knows what they want, but those ideas never see the light of day because we're bogged down with the QREC and the Kew Library and customer first and whatever else.
Thanks very much, Michael. Charles, you reckon I can ask another one?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so here's another one. What about homelessness? Is homelessness a problem in Boroondara, and what can council do about it? Michael.
Very good question. I think homelessness is a community, it's a community symptom often, whether it's mental health or whether it's a set of circumstances where somebody's become jobless and then quickly had, maybe a relationship breakup. It can happen to people that you wouldn't think it wouldn't necessarily happen to. I think council has a role. I'm not an expert, but I think we need council to be looking towards low-cost housing. Vic Roads is a great example where we have the ability. We need to integrate low-cost housing so that people that are on lower-cost salaries don't have to live out whoop and then come into leafy green Boroondara to do some of the lower cost jobs and then spend an hour in the car getting back home and having to rely on two cars. So we need low cost housing for our own sake. The Europeans do it well, better. So again, I think where there's a will, there's a way. And I'm not an expert, but I'm sure there are experts around we could talk to.
Michael. Greg, is homelessness a problem, and what can council do? What are your views?
Well, as Michael began, I think it's important to understand that each person is an individual case and to understand the reasons why they're having difficulties and to help direct them to the appropriate support agency. Apart from that, I'm not sure that council has a role. Or I don't understand. I'm not sure that there's a role for the council to play, except for taking some action if it seems that there's a problem that's not being addressed.
Thank you, Greg. Well, here's a question that's very much about Boroondara. It's we might go with you, Greg, first. How would you, as a councillor, act to minimise the impact of the Northeast Link on the citizens in Boroondara? You've got a minute.
Okay, good. Well, Northeast Link and the Eastern Freeway have two major impacts. One is the noise And whenever one's in almost all of Bellevue, and at least half of Bellevue, one can hear the roar of the noise of the Eastern Freeway. And also there's the pollution of particulate matter, which is a danger to health. And those have to be addressed. And the only way I know of fixing that is to enclose the freeway, similar to what was done with the CityLink sound tube. And then that would reduce the noise and pollution. The air that's sucked out would be filtered to remove the particulate matter and possibly the pollution, the air pollution. The other problem is the traffic that will be to change in traffic patterns once it's completed. And some of our roads, like Burke Road, I understand, are going to become much more impacted. I haven't looked at the traffic models, although there are people in Boroondara, citizen activists, who have done that. And the idea would be to, in town halls, find out what they've learned and then engage the appropriate government departments, state government departments, to figure out how to reduce the impacts.
Thank you very much, Greg. Michael, what are your views about?
How long have I got, Andrew?
Well, we'll give you a minute. Give you a minute,
Minute?
and then I'll. But Greg went for about 30 seconds over, so I'll give you 90. I'll give you 90 seconds.
Okay. Look, the Northeast Link, it's happening. The state government is barreling along, but we know that state government, Victorian government, has financial issues, so we've got to make sure they don't cut corners when it comes to Northeast Link. So on noise and on trees and on air pollution and even on public transport, council's got a big role to play. It could be, first of all, a watchdog on the Northeast Link to make sure the specifications on noise and on pollution find their way into the tenders to the contractors, and then find their way into the contractors with who are successful contractors. So we've got to be very, very diligent that things don't slip through. There's a bit of a lack of transparency by the Northeast Link themselves on their noise treatment of underpasses. You know, where let's say that the road's going to underpass the access over to the freeway Gulf. What are they doing there? It's not transparent. We need 3D drawings. We need visibility. In terms of just a couple of very specific things, we haven't seen the schedule for building the noise barriers. I've been talking to residents. One idea is that we build the noise barriers early in 2020, let's say late 2025 rather than in 2028. We haven't seen the schedule. I haven't seen the schedule. So I'll be pushing, if I get elected, to have them built earlier, ideally end of 2025. And in terms of, I'll just throw in public transport, we need a complete review of all the buses, the 285, and put another route into North Balwyn.
Thank you, Michael. Just checking, Charles, that there's been no further questions, and I carry on with my burning ones.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered the questions from the
All right. So we've probably got
residents.
time for just one more, because what we'll do is we'll have maybe one more question, and then we'll invite Michael and Greg to have 2 or 3 minutes with some closing comments. So how about this? Any thoughts about the Victorian government's proposed Campbell Junction Activity Centre? How about we go first to Michael?
Oh, wow. That's
Thoughts?
a good question. I went along to the housing forum at the town hall about 3 weeks ago on a Sunday. Some of you might have been there. There's a disconnect between the Boroondara's forecast population growth and now the new state government population growth of 90% by 2051. I think residents of Boroondara are very worried about the state government projections and what it would mean for infrastructure and amenity and public transport and the reason that they live in Boroondara. So I think we've got to be very, very careful and then be kept pretty strong as a council. I'm not even sure there's enough builders in Victoria to do what the state government wants. having said that, if a house is dilapidated and going to get bowled over, I'd prefer to see dual occupancy, not side by side, monolithic, but front and back, rather than so-called McMansion. And we do need to find a way to get more housing for younger people. So I'm in favour of more housing, but we've got to be careful how we do it.
Thank you, Michael. Greg, thoughts about the Victorian government's proposed Campbell Junction Activity Centre?
I just heard the general plan for Camberwell. I don't know the specifics, but the proposal to increase the number of dwellings in Boroondara by almost doubling by 2050 is alarming, because that would be done without increasing the infrastructure in terms of public transport and parks and so on, is my understanding. So it would be a disaster. And I think Boroondara and other councils should push back hard on that plan. I think in Victoria, the original idea was to cater for a large population, was to build regional centres and the infrastructure to accommodate new cities. And I think that's the way forward. The state government is simply trying to do a cheap version by not having to invest in infrastructure. And it's just going to be very unfortunate. We just need to push back as hard as we possibly can.
Thank you, Greg. So we've reached the end. Charles, just a shout out for just any last minute burning questions.
Look, there might be a couple of quick ones.
Yeah, let's do that. And let's say 1 minute. Yeah.
There's a question on light pollution. Are the candidates aware of that problem? And what could council do?
Greg, 1 minute about light pollution.
No, I wasn't aware people had raised it as an issue. In fact, I'd actually heard the opposite, that people want more street lighting for safety. We'd have to understand why some residents consider there's a problem with light pollution. Maybe it affects them when they're trying to sleep. But I don't have enough information to make an intelligent comment on that.
Thank you, Greg. Michael, light pollution.
I'm not an expert, but when we campaigned, and I was part of a small residents group to campaign to stop overdevelopment in Hayes Paddock, they wanted to put lights on the far oval. This was for a private school to use as a training facility. We campaigned, and one of the arguments we campaigned on was that it would be light pollution. Wasn't that the top one we campaigned on? We campaigned on a number of issues. Light pollution was certainly one, though. So I have some understanding. If you're going to light up areas at night, then you're going to disrupt the biodiversity that lives there. Of course, you know, the owls and when those nocturnal creatures come out, it's going to be completely disrupted. So I'm not an expert. I'd be listening to experts. I see Astrid's on the call. I think Astrid's got a fair bit of knowledge on this. Again, we need to come together as a community. We need to educate each other, you know, be educated. And when we make those decisions, how do we reach the balance? And I'm sure we can get a better balance than what we've got.
Thank you, Michael. Well, it's 8:53, and we want to give the candidates a couple of minutes to make any final comments. So, Charles, I think we're out of time for more questions. Thank you very much, though, for organising those.
So, majority, there's probably disappointed people, but
well, you know, always feel free. I'm guessing that you can reach out to Greg and Michael independently. They have their contact details on the websites about the election. So this isn't the end. This is just the beginning, because we've just started campaigning. So now I'm going to invite Greg and Michael to say a few words in closing. So I'll put the clock on for 2 minutes so we can finish in time to finish by 9 o'clock with a bit of time to spare. So Greg, how about you go first? Michael started this evening.
Okay. Well, one of the obvious, to me, changes that we should try to make in Bellevue is to, after 12 years of nothing, is to reinstitute town halls so that we can start initiatives from the people. There are really 4 levels of government, 4 levels of organisation. There's volunteers, the community, plus the local government, state government, and federal government. And historically, a lot of things have started with volunteers, the community. I think we need to get back to that. So town halls would be very important to get that initiative going from the community. And then for me, what's important is to make progress with some of these big items, like doing something to reduce the noise and particulate matter pollution from the Eastern Freeway. And the only solution, noise barriers don't work. Hayes Paddock has one, it doesn't work. What we need to do is enclose the entire freeway, as we've seen in Melbourne with another example, and utilise the area that's been taken away from us with the area of the Eastern Freeway. Another is to place power lines underground. That would reduce our costs significantly and increase our streetscapes. And it's been done in many other cities around the world, including Perth. So these are things that have just taken so long to do. Another is that we haven't done. Another is to extend the tram routes to build out our local transportation. It was 100 years ago that there was a proposal to extend the 72 tram from Gotham Road, White Horse Road to Doncaster Road. We need to do that. It would make it much easier for people to get around the community, around Boroondara, and also to extend the 48 tram out to Greythorn Road or Williamson's Road. That would help a lot of the community out there as well. And the tram was last extended in 1938. We're getting on to almost 90 years now, and we haven't had an extension. So there are these big items too I'd like to make some progress with. We'd be using the status of being a council or using the status of the Mayor of Boroondara to interact with the state government to make some progress on these big items. And I should stop there.
Okay. Michael?
Okay, look, at a very high level, it starts with integrity and transparency of council laws. If I'm elected, I'm committed. Absolutely, it seems obvious to me that you would have that. But we're not having that with QREC. What's really gone on at QREC? There's no transparency. We don't even know when it's going to be finished. There was no transparency with the Q Library decision, what they really looked at with renovation and renewal. So it sort of starts for me a bit with the capital spend, the $80 million on capital, $80 million on staff, $80 million on subcontractors. The easiest place to start is stop the waste, have more transparency on the capital spend, and then reprioritise the money we'd save. You'd easily save, tens of millions of dollars. I'm not sure, I'm not going to say exactly, but we might save 10 or $20 million. Reprioritise to local and to climate and the things that the actual community wants. And particularly in Bellevue, I feel like there's things going on in Camberwell and Hawthorn, but there's not a lot going on in Bellevue. So, we just need the basics. We need toilets in Hyde Park. We need public toilets in Lee Park. We need to be a really advocate, strong watchdog on the Northeast Link, and council can pick up the slack. Some of the amenities that got knocked out of scope of the Northeast Link, council can pick that up if we've got the money, which we should have the money, and keep the rates lower by doing that at the same time. And if I'm elected as a community independent, I don't care which colour is in the state seat of Kew or the state seat of Hawthorn or in Kooyong. I'll work with any of them. That's the way to get things done. That's the way to make progress as a community.
Thank you very much, Michael. Well, that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you very much to Greg and Michael. All the best with the election. Thank you very much, Charles, for excellently managing the questions. And thank you, everyone, for attending and submitting such good questions. That brings the 2024 Candidates Forum to a close. Lighter Footprints will make this recording that I've been doing from this session available on its YouTube channel. So that's the end. All you need to do now is click leave on the bottom right in the Zoom meeting. And I wish
Andrew,
you
if I
all a
might-
very good night. Michael, yes, go for it, Charles.
I can just quickly reiterate what you said. If you still have any questions, please contact your candidates.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Charles. And thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.